This download is the only extract the BBC has of this edition of Desert Island Discs. The presenter was Roy Plumley.
Some biographical questions, Sir Alec. You are a Londoner, aren't you?
Yes, I was born within the sound of Bow Bells.
Was there any precedent for the theatre in your family?
None at all.
Did you see a lot of theatre as a child?
Well, I think the first show I went to when I was about 5 was Chu Chin Chow, and then I started going to the theatre from about 9 or 10 on, and fell in love with everything I saw when the curtain went up, you know.
Yes. Was the theatre your first job when you left school?
No, I went into an advertising agency as a copywriter and layout man.
What sort of products did you write about?
Razor blades and radio valves and lime juice, as far as I can remember. They stick in my mind mostly.
Looking back, do you think you were good at it?
No, I know I was very bad. And as a layout man, I very firmly remember the day when I ordered a 4-foot by 4-foot block instead of a 4-inch square one. They didn't sack me for that, but they might easily have done, of course.
Why did you give it up?
Well, I got a scholarship to the Fay Compton Studio of Dramatic Art, and I'd always wanted to be an actor, so I said goodbye to advertising. And
what was your first professional appearance?
Virtually a walk-on and understudying a line in a play called Libel at the King's Theatre, Hammersmith, which then transferred to the Playhouse, for which I was paid 12 shillings a week.
And your next engagement?
And then I went into a play by Noel Langley called Queer Cargo, in which I understudied the 6 leading men, and walked on and had a line to say as a Chinese coolie and an English sailor and a French pirate, and I think I picked up £3 a week for that.
And after that?
Then I got my first proper job with Gielgud, playing Osric in his Hamlet at the New Theatre, and stayed with him for about 4 plays, and then to the Old Vic for a season, and then back to Gielgud for another 4 plays. Yes. In fact, I owed my proper start to Gielgud entirely.
I believe you played Hamlet at the Old Vic when you were only 24.
Yes, in 1938 in Tyrone Guthrie's Modern Dress production.
Mm-hmm. So you alternated between the Gielgud seasons and the Old Vic until the war came along?
Yes, with 1 or 2 other things thrown in.
Well, picking up on your career, Sir Alec, you spent the war years in the Royal Navy. In 1946, I remember, you went back to the Old Vic and you made your first film, Great Expectations. How was it you'd never worked in films before?
Well, I'd never wanted to. I was in love with the theatre and rather turned up my nose at films, I think. And I'd also, some years before, done a couple of days as a crowd artist and hated that. And I thought, well, I'll wait for the film to come along with a part which I know something about, and that happened to be Great Expectations.
Yes. That film was more or less based on a stage adaptation you'd written yourself some years before.
I wrote an adaptation of Great Expectations in which I appeared, in which David Lean saw, and he finally made the film.
Mm-hmm. It was the first of many memorable screen performances. We remember Fagin and Oliver Twist, the 8, or was it 10 parts in Kind Hearts and Coronet, Bridge on the River Kwai. Which of your films have satisfied you most? Which were the most rewarding?
Well, I don't think I get much satisfaction out of any of them. Once I've appeared in them, they're dead, as far as I'm concerned. But I suppose The Bridge on the River Kwai was the most successful, in fact, easily the most successful of the films I've appeared in, and therefore I have a regard for it.
Despite obvious financial blandishments, you've never allowed yourself to become a film actor. You've always insisted on time off for the theatre.
Well, I think it's good for an actor to contact a live audience, and also for him, technically, to fill his lungs with air and do some shouting now and then.
We remember particularly, since the war, T.S. Eliot's The Cocktail Party, and your own production of Hamlet, which was perhaps rather too unconventional for some of the critics.
You're talking about my disastrous one in 1951. I'm not going to follow that up. It was my own fault.
Will you have another go at Hamlet?
No, I'm too old.
Oh, surely not. There are many precedents.
Well, I know that some actors of 70 have creeped onto the stage and done it, but it's a young man's part and a young man's ambition, and I'm certainly retiring from the list on that.
Are there any parts you particularly want to play for which the opportunity hasn't yet arisen?
No, I wouldn't mind trying on the quiet to play Macbeth again, which I once played at Sheffield Repertory when I was about 25, and I'd quite like to play Ulysses in Troilus and Cressida, but I have no particular ambitions, really.
Well, we wouldn't mind seeing them. So, Alec, when playing a classical part, Shakespeare, for instance, do you like to read back, to read what commentators and critics have written about the play and the way it's been performed in the past, or do you like to build up from scratch?
Well, I always have read. I think this is a fault of most English actors, we read too much about the classics. If ever I played them again, I think I would try and avoid it.
What about an historical character like Lawrence, for example? Did you build up your portrait from the literature about him and talks with his friends, or build up your own conception from the text of the play?
Well, I'd read quite a bit about him before I read Mr. Rattigan's play, so I had a conception of the man there. I would say that most of what I'm doing in Ross is a result of talking to people who knew Lawrence well.
Mm-hmm. You've always managed to avoid typecasting.
Well, if you've got large ears when you're very young and obviously going to go a bit bald, you're not the glamorous, juvenile lead, and you're forced into trying to find all sorts of other faces to put on yourself.
As one of the critics pointed out, you have a liking for playing men of genius and obsession. You like to play the lonely man, the odd man out. You don't often get the girl in the end.
Well, I've been married for 22 years. I got one girl in the end. But again, you can't expect the public to expect kind of elephant ears to be the sex symbol in pictures and plays.
To what extent do you believe you have to enter into a character at performance in the theatre? Do you believe, as some actors do, that all the emotion can be expended at rehearsal and the performance given on technique, or must you feel with the character at every performance?
Well, I wouldn't like to expend all emotion during rehearsals. I think that's the way most of us work, is to experiment emotionally and then try and, tack it down for performance. But on the other hand, anything can spark off a piece of emotion in a performance. But playing 8 times a week a large role, which the economics of the London theatre demand, means you can't feel your way, I don't think, throughout a whole evening. On the other hand, I do like to try and be in the mood of the character as I see it.